Somewhere out there is the most common blood donor alive. He's O positive, the type nearly 40% of people share. The same type hospitals hand strangers before they even run a test. If he's ever bleeding out on a table, any hospital on Earth can save him within minutes. But what if we looked at the complete opposite? What if your blood was so rare that if you needed a transfusion, there might not be a single compatible drop of it anywhere on the planet? Not in your city, not in your country, not on Earth? You were probably taught there are 8 blood types back in school. In reality, scientists have identified over 44 recognized blood group systems and more than 600 individual blood group antigens, and most of them you've never heard of. Let's work our way from rare all the way down to the rarest blood that has ever been documented. Starting with the basics, since every rarer type on this list is really just a deeper layer underneath this one. Blood type comes down to 2 systems stacked on top of each other, A-B-O and Rh. Combine them and you get the 8 types you already know. A, B, AB and O, each either positive or negative. The rarest of these 8 is AB negative, found in less than 1% of people, since it requires inheriting both the rarer B antigen and the rarer negative RF factor at the same time. Hospitals often run short on it because so few people can donate it, but almost anyone with it can still find a match somewhere in the world if they need one. So even the rarest blood type most people will ever hear about is really just the shallow end of what's actually out there. Moving on to the RS system itself, because being Rh negative isn't equally rare everywhere. In the United States, about 15% of people are Rh negative. In parts of East Asia, that number drops below 1%. But in the Basque Country, a small region straddling Spain and France, Rh negative rates climb as high as 35%, the highest concentration on Earth. Geneticists still debate exactly why, but it's tied to the Basque people being one of the most genetically distinct and isolated populations in Europe, with roots that predate most of their neighbors. For decades, local folklore even framed it as evidence the Basques descended from a separate, older lineage entirely. The science is more complicated than that, but the number itself is real, and it turns Rh negative from a single global rarity into a trait that depends entirely on your ancestry map. But there is a level beyond negative. Moving on to Rh-null blood, nicknamed golden blood, because it doesn't just lack the one antigen that makes you negative, it lacks all 61 possible antigens in the entire Rh system at once. It was first identified in 1961 in an indigenous Australian woman whose blood didn't react to any known Rh antibody in existence. To this day, fewer than 50 people on Earth are confirmed to have it. Rh-null blood is so universally compatible that it can be transfused into almost anyone with a rare or complicated Rh combination, which makes it priceless to researchers and hospitals worldwide. But the trade-off is brutal. The people who carry it can only ever receive blood from each other. Fewer than 50 potential donors, scattered across the entire planet, for each other's emergencies. If one of them is ever in a car accident far from home, there may be no compatible blood available anywhere in the world, and doctors know it the moment they read the chart. Moving on to a blood type most people have never heard of at all. The Bombay blood group, also called the HH phenotype, was discovered in 1952 by a doctor in Mumbai, after patients who tested as ordinary type O turned out to react violently to normal type O blood during transfusion. The reason is that the H antigen, the base molecule every ABO type is built on top of, including O, is missing entirely in these patients. Without it, the body simply cannot construct A or B antigens no matter what the underlying genes say, and it treats regular type O blood, the supposed universal donor, as a foreign invader. In Mumbai, it shows up in roughly 1 in 10,000 people. In Europe, that number drops to about 1 in a million. Because it's so easy to misdiagnose as ordinary type O on a routine test, some patients have only discovered they have Bombay blood after a transfusion nearly killed them. Once diagnosed, people with Bombay blood can only receive blood from other Bombay-type donors, so many of them bank their own blood years in advance, just in case they ever need surgery. Moving on to a blood type that connects almost directly back to how humans reached the Americas. The Diego blood group centers on a marker called the Dia antigen, and its distribution is one of the strangest maps in all of human genetics. It's essentially absent in European and African populations, undetectable in most blood banks across the US and Europe entirely, but it appears in over 35% of some indigenous South American populations, and in around 12% of people of Chinese and Japanese descent. That overlap isn't a coincidence. Geneticists use the Dia antigen as physical evidence connecting indigenous peoples of the Americas back to ancestral populations in Siberia and East Asia, a genetic fingerprint of a migration that happened thousands of years before written history. So this one blood marker isn't just rare, it's a piece of ancient human migration still circulating in people's veins today. Moving on to a blood type that isn't rare everywhere, just almost nowhere at once. The Duffy blood group has a null version, meaning red blood cells with no Duffy antigen on their surface at all. In the US and Europe, this is vanishingly rare, but across West Africa, it's the overwhelming default. Somewhere between 80 and 100% of people there carry it, and in parts of the Middle East, it's still over half the population. That's because Duffy null red blood cells are naturally resistant to Plasmodium vivax, one of the parasites responsible for malaria. In regions where that disease has shaped human survival for thousands of years, this rare blood type became the norm instead of the exception. It's a reminder that rarity isn't a fixed global number. Sometimes it depends entirely on where you're standing and what your ancestors had to survive to get there. Moving on to a blood type tangled up with a disease of its own. The Kell blood group was first described in 1946, named after Mrs. Kelleher, whose newborn developed a severe blood reaction caused by an antibody against the child's red blood cells. The completely antigen-free version of this system, written K0, was identified over a decade later, in 1957. People missing the Kell antigen entirely can develop McLeod syndrome, an X-linked condition in which red blood cells grow strange spiky projections called acanthocytes, visible under a microscope like tiny thorned stars instead of smooth discs. It comes packaged with progressive muscle, nerve, and heart complications that often don't appear until adulthood. It's one of the only blood types on this list where the absence of an antigen isn't just a transfusion inconvenience, it's a ticking warning sign written directly into someone's cells from birth. Moving on to a blood type where the danger isn't hiding in your blood at all, it's hiding in your eyes. Almost everyone carries what's called the eye antigen on their red blood cells by the time they're a toddler. But a small number of people never make the switch from the infant version, called little I, to the adult version at all and stay adult I for life. On its own, that's mostly harmless, just another rare marker transfusion labs keep on file. But in parts of Japan and Taiwan, researchers found that the exact same mutation responsible for the adult eye blood phenotype also happens to disable a protein needed for lens development in the eye, meaning some people with this blood type are also born with congenital cataracts, a completely unrelated part of the body affected by the same single broken gene. It's one of the strangest examples in medicine of one mutation quietly rewriting two completely different parts of a person at once, one you'd only find in a blood test and one you'd only find in an eye exam. Moving on to a blood type that stayed invisible for decades, by accident. VEL-negative blood lacks a marker called the VEL antigen, and for years it was so difficult to detect using standard lab techniques that patients suffered severe, sometimes fatal transfusion reactions before doctors even knew VEL existed as a blood group at all. It remains one of the hardest rare types to screen for today, which means, even now, some VEL-negative people only find out their blood doesn't play by the usual rules in the middle of an emergency room, when it's already too late to plan around it. Moving on to two blood types that were only discovered because scientists went looking for the reason two mystery patients kept reacting badly to compatible blood. In 2012, researchers publishing in Nature Genetics traced two unexplained antigens back to specific transport proteins in the cell membrane, ABCB6, which turned out to define an entirely new blood group system called Rarest, and ABCG2, which defined another called Junior. The junior negative version, in particular, clusters heavily in Japan, where more than 50,000 people are thought to carry it, occasionally causing transfusion complications or complications between mother and baby during pregnancy that doctors elsewhere might never think to test for. What makes these two remarkable isn't just the numbers, it's that an entire Rh blood group system, one of 44 now recognized worldwide, can still be hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right unlucky patient to reveal it. Let's pause for a second and take stock of how far down the rabbit hole we already are. We started with 8 blood types you learned in school. Then we found one so rare it has fewer known carriers than a small high school. Then one that turns the universal donor into a threat. Then one that's actually written into the story of how humans crossed continents. Then ones that are only dangerous in combination with the country you were born in, the disease hiding behind them, or the completely unrelated part of your body they quietly rewire. And we're still not at the bottom. Now, before we get to the rarest blood on Earth, here's a twist. Rarity isn't only about your blood type. Sometimes it's about something swimming inside blood that's otherwise completely ordinary. James Harrison, an Australian donor who passed away in 2025 at 88 years old, had a completely unremarkable blood type. What made him famous was a rare antibody in his plasma called anti-D, discovered after a routine donation decades earlier. That antibody became the basis for a treatment given to Rh-negative mothers to stop their immune systems from attacking their own Rh-positive babies during pregnancy, a condition that used to be fatal for newborns. Harrison donated blood and plasma 1,173 times over almost 60 years, specifically because so few people carry that antibody in a usable form, and doctors estimate his donations helped save around 2.4 million babies. He earned the nickname, the man with the golden arm, and it's proof that sometimes the rarest, most valuable thing in someone's blood has nothing to do with their type at all. This is exactly why rare blood registries exist at all. Organizations like the American Rare Donor Program and international frozen blood banks track down people with Bombay blood, Rh-null, Vel-negative, and dozens of other rare types by name, and keep frozen units of their blood in long-term storage, sometimes for up to 10 years, specifically so a hospital on the other side of the planet has something to reach for if one of them is ever in an accident far from home. Being on that registry can mean the difference between a hospital finding a match in hours instead of not finding one at all. It's a quiet, unglamorous kind of safety net, built one rare donor at a time. And then, finally, there's the rarest tier of all. Every blood type on this list, no matter how small the numbers get, still belongs to a named, cataloged system, with other people somewhere on Earth who share it. But every so often, doctors encounter blood that doesn't match any known system at all. A private antigen, or the total absence of one, discovered in a single family, sometimes in a single person. When that happens, researchers don't just log a rare case and move on. They sequence it, characterize it, and occasionally define an entirely new blood group system named after the one family who carries it, exactly the way Langreus and Jr. were found. For that person, there is no donor registry to call, no rare blood network to search. Their blood is, quite literally, one of one, on the entire planet. So the next time someone tells you blood type doesn't matter, remember, for a tiny number of people on Earth, it's the single rarest thing about their entire body, and quietly, the one thing that could someday put their life completely out of their own hands.